Hello, everyone. This is Dana Theus and my group of panelists here. Um, we are here to talk about the millennial generation and all the benefits that the millennial generation is bringing to the workforce. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Can hear you great,
good.
Dana.
Good. So our panelists are there. If you're online, you'll be able to ask questions, I believe, on the side. I'm not exactly sure, but there should be a way you can ask questions and we can see them and we will answer them. And what I want to do now is start out with an introduction of our panelists, everyone who's currently on the line. And as you introduce yourself, if you could just give like 1 or 2 words about why you're here. What is it about the millennial generation that's interesting to you? And if there's one pearl of wisdom that you'd like everybody to know right now, what is it, briefly? So I'll start with my co-host, Jasmine Watts. Jasmine?
Thanks, Dana. I am Jasmine Watts, and I'm the editor of Miss Millennial magazine. And I am a millennial myself, and I feel like my expertise is because I started my magazine based around millennials. And the one thing of wisdom, I guess I would say in regards to millennials is that they are definitely innovators. Innovators. They have no problem starting new things and starting trends, and they don't care who doesn't like it. So I think that's something that they should kind of be confident about and, embrace, definitely. But that's what I love about it, and that's why I'm here.
Great. Let's go to Ann Lohr. Ann, why are you here?
So my background is international business, and I spent 12 years in East Africa working with many, many tribes, trying to get them to come together to build a team, and then moved back to the States after I sold that company. And what I learned from that is that although people have differences, they actually have a lot more in common. So the work that I do right now is helping large organizations build their teams and build their leadership capacity. And so millennials are obviously a huge part of that. They're part of our main force, and so I love working with millennials. I love helping senior leaders learn about millennials, and I help millennials learn about themselves, and they learn how to work in large organizations. And I guess my pearl of wisdom would be, if there is just one thing about millennials everybody needs to know, is that they're all about purpose, a bigger purpose, a larger purpose. And so I would say for any leaders out there is to really make sure that you tie whatever the job is to a larger purpose, and you will have their commitment. Thanks, Dana.
Excellent. I'm going to introduce Lindsey next, but we're also getting a note here from one of our viewers that there's an echo. So if everybody who's not talking can go ahead and mute themselves, then maybe we can reduce the echo a little bit. So Lindsey, why don't you introduce yourself now?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm Lindsey Christine. I'm the marketing leader at Miss Millennial magazine. I also have a background in publishing. I've been in publishing for about 8 years. I'm here because I am a millennial, just like Jasmine. And one thing I can say about a millennial is that we're leaders. We're very creative, like Jasmine said, and we're very innovative. And I'm excited to be a part of this panel, and I think it'll be great. And I mean, one thing that I notice about millennials is that they're afraid to integrate themselves into the workforce, and it's possible. So, thank you.
Oh, very cool. That might be a good subject for us to talk about. Lindsey, go ahead and mute yourself because you definitely have some background noise going on there. And Caroline, last but definitely not least, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Caroline Clark. I myself am a millennial, and I'm a recruiter for an IT company in the Tysons Corner area. I see distinct differences when recruiting across different generations, and definitely millennials are no different in that capacity. So just in looking at them as a generation and as an age group, there are kind of thematic things that come out as I kind of look at the similarities across the different individuals that fall into the millennial category. So look forward to talking about those today and learning more about others' perspectives as well.
Cool. Well, thank you, everybody. And maybe we can start off by, first of all, technically, what is the millennial generation? And then secondly, what are the stories we're hearing about why millennials are, quote, hard to work with? And what do each of us really think is the truth? Because I don't think that's the truth at all in my experience. But I'm going to toss that out, and I'm going to toss it to Anne first, and then ask anyone else to jump in with their thoughts about, what we're hearing the hard part is, but what's the real truth behind it.
Thanks, Dana. So technically, millennials are also known as Gen Y, and they are born between 1981 and 2001. So millennials born at that transition period, that's their name, also known as Gen Y. They're the second biggest generation after baby boomers, just a hair smaller. And for those of you who are not familiar with generations, it goes traditionalists, they're the oldest, then baby boomers is next, then Gen X, I'm a Gen X, and then Gen Y or millennial. So that's how they kind of fall into the spectrum. I mean, the stories, I think we could all tell stories about what we hear. They're entitled, they all want a trophy, they don't work hard, they want to do yoga at noon, which some of it is true because this generation does believe in balance. I also agree that a lot of it is a myth, and I think that if we motivate Generation Y and really empower them, that they are going to do great things. They're already doing great things. It's just a matter of every generation, boomers, X's, and Y's, adapting to each other, learning from each other, and leveraging each other's strengths. So I'll stop there, and I'll let Lindsey and Carolyn chime in as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you just mentioned, Anne, really resonates with kind of the themes that I see when I look at millennials as a generation. Kind of the three that spoke to me are flexibility in the workplace, and that can mean a variety of different things. As a recruiter, it's not always a number-based game for millennials. They are looking for, as you kind of said, one of the myths, yoga at noon, but that can be really, yoga at noon can be different for everyone, whether it's, I get a lot of questions about internal mentorship programs, training, professional development, which I think really speaks to other generations, but is definitely something that I see a lot when extending offers to those in the millennial generation, perhaps more than others. Others are looking more for those numbers or paid time off, that sort of thing. Millennials, for the most part, it's always kind of how can I get to the next step, and looking for flexibility and support to do that. Something else that really speaks to me is achievement. It's not, and I see that a lot working with other millennials, and it doesn't really matter whether you're an executive management team member or just started, in the workplace yesterday. It's what you bring to the table each and every time in a project, and I see that time and time again when working with millennials. And as a millennial myself, I think that resonates with me. And then finally, entrepreneurship is something that I think just as a generation, but really as an era, has been a focus for us. And going out, it doesn't have to be starting your own business, but trying something new and different and having a comprehensive experience, both in career and outside of that, is something that is something that's important to millennials. So I'll stop there, but those are kind of the three themes: flexibility, achievement, and entrepreneurship, that take on different meanings for different millennials, that kind of spoke to me with this generation.
I just want to chime in and say that, the yoga at noon thing and the whole purpose-driven thing, I mean, those are the things that I love about this generation coming into the workforce as an older person. I'm technically Gen X, Gen X, but I'm kind of on the cusp of boomers. And what I notice is that women in my generation share a lot of the same values, wanting to have work-life balance, wanting to have purpose. And, now the whole generation coming in of young women and men have those same values. And I have children that are, technically millennials too. And I just think it's wonderful that these values that I consider really healthy are now things that the new workforce wants and needs. And so I just think it's a breath of fresh air, and I think it's going to change the workforce for the better, and bring in a lot more balance and purpose into the workforce, because that's what's important to them. So that's kind of my pearl of wisdom and joy in this topic.
Yeah, and I agree with you too, Dana. In regards to that, I wanted to touch on, we just got a question from Shelly Thomas. I wanted to bring that up here. There's a lot of research suggesting that many female millennials are burnt out by 30. What type of work-life balance benefits or initiatives attract you in a company, and how has balance influenced your career development? So I think that's a great question, and you bring up a great point, Shelley, something that while millennials do strive for work-life balance, I feel like a big difference between our generation and others is that we have so much technology in our workplace that we take work-life balance and they say, oh, you can work from home this day, you can do this, and we love that flexibility. But at the same time, we don't have boundaries either in the workplace. So we're sending out emails at 2 a.m., we're saying I'm doing this at this time, even though we may be doing yoga at noon, but we're working constantly. And I feel like that plays a big role there as far as females being burnt out by 30 when it comes to that, the whole technology take on it as well. And did you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, and I love how you explain that. And the word that I use is continuum. And again, to kind of understand, again, I don't like to focus on differences, but to understand why there's clashes, because there are clashes, is that X's like to be boxes. This is my work box, this is my family box, this is my exercise box, and never shall the two meet. And the word I like to use for millennials is it's a continuum. It's a continuum of work-life play, work-life play, work-life play. And as you say, very hard workers. I mean, this whole entitled thing. I'm telling you, this generation is the most educated generation we have. They have the highest number of degrees of any other generation. They are planning on getting at least a second or third degree, and they work until 2 a.m. And so maybe, yes, they do yoga at noon, and however, they will do what needs to get done. It's just a question of getting back to the question in the chat of how do we work with them so that they don't get burned out. Because if they get burned out, the company has lost and our economy has lost, because this is an important, powerful, big generation that we can no longer just kind of dismiss. I'll go on mute now.
And I want to touch on that too. And that goes back to what you're saying about the workforce and what Caroline was talking about too, about mentorship. And I know that's something that millennials look for, is they're looking for not managers, they're looking for people who are going to help them as they help the company. They want to work with people who are going to look at them and say, I see your potential, maybe these are some steps you should take to achieve those things that you want to do while doing a great thing for this company at the same time. So that mentorship role goes into that a lot as well. And also seeing as they're innovative, they're not very traditional. And I feel like there are a lot of companies, even though there are a lot more startups now and a lot of different work environments that really talk about flexibility and talk about work-life balance, there's still a lot of traditional, very traditional companies where people are working 9 to 5, and millennials don't have, like I said, we don't have that box. We're working 9 to 5, and then we go and we work, at home and then over the weekend and things like that. So I feel like even though we are very in tune with our technology, we love our cell phones, in the proper environment where the company is actually paying attention to flexibility and paying attention to how much we're working, when are we sending out emails and things like that, I feel like they shouldn't be burnt out. They shouldn't be burnt out. That's what your mentors are there for, to make sure that you are doing better as a person, not just in your job. So those are my 2 cents there.
I would add, too, about the burnout subject, and I think this is true for any age, but I'm particularly sensitive to it with younger workers, because if you're just coming into the workforce and you don't know the rules, and your boss tells you, well, we work 9 to 5, but you have this continuum like Anne's talking about, like you kind of want to work a little, play a little, work a little, play a little, you might be trying to sort of meet the 9 to 5 requirement and your own desire to be more integrated as a person and to be more fluid and do your work and your play. And like Jasmine, you said, you don't have boundaries. Well, you need to set boundaries for yourself. And if your boss is telling you 9 to 5 and then you feel compelled to work all night, you have to take care of yourself. And I think a lot of us older workers aren't good at mentoring anyone, much less younger workers, that you have to take care of yourself. You have to put up those boundaries so you don't burn out. And I'm afraid sometimes that older workers take advantage of the younger workers who want to please and do what the workplace requires, but also have this desire to be more fluid. And so it is not an easy situation to be in. I think that's why we're seeing so much burnout. And as Caroline said, younger workers are really achievement oriented and they're really driven. So they're trying to do it all. And if you're a younger worker listening to this and you're feeling burnout, just know you can't, and you need to learn to set those boundaries early on, including going back to your boss and saying, I know you want me here 9 to 5, but frankly, I want to work later at night, and can we come up with a way of communicating about it that's okay with you, so I'm doing my job. It's not an easy conversation to have, but it's not acceptable to burn yourself out because you won't last. It just, nobody does. So that's my 2 cents for the burnout issues. Something else Shelley asked, and I'm wondering if Caroline can speak to this, because you kind of did, Caroline, when you introduced yourself. But she also asked what type of work-life balance benefits or initiatives in a company can attract millennials in. So if you want to bring millennials in, what kind of programs will really be interesting to them? And you mentioned a few, but maybe you can elaborate, Caroline.
Absolutely. I think we've touched on the role that a manager can play in your career, and this is, I'm going to go back to the benefits piece of it, but I think your manager can really set the tone as we see the shift of having to be at work 9 to 5, or having to be in the office as opposed to telecommuting. I think that's kind of a topic we're seeing again and again with Yahoo and other companies. I think that finding that advocate in your manager can be huge. If you can't find it there, finding someone else who can build that message. But as far as benefits go, I find that the training piece, not to go back to something I already mentioned, but that can really take a lot of different angles, and I'm fortunate to work at a company where you can really complete training classes in different areas that may not specifically be in your job title or responsibilities, but can relate, and you can leverage that training into your job in some way. So, for example, I work at an IT company. We do a lot of government contracting. I was interested in gaining a certificate that a lot of people that I recruit have, IDLE foundations or the program management certification. And I went to my manager, said, hey, is this something that the company would cover or pay for, even though I'm not a program manager, just so I can better recruit those that are, and he was in full support of it. So I think finding a company that it's not even seeing the benefits summary and seeing those bullet points and being able to say, oh, look, I have 20 things versus this other company that has 100. It's more that looking at those 20 things and seeing how fluid you can make those for yourself and build your story on so kind of being creative, I guess, is where I'm going with that, which is more self-developed, I think, in a lot of cases rather than company developed. But I think also finding companies that you can go to the department next door and say, hey, can I shadow you for a day just to see what your job entails day to day? I think that's huge. And so it's not always a structured, even our mentorship program, it's not a structured program, but I think having the environment to invite those sort of unstructured benefits are huge. And I think millennials are definitely looking for those. And they're okay with the unstructured. I think they are open to building a structured environment, but they just need an environment that is open to that. So I think that's more vague than I would like it to be, but I hope I'm coming across in that looking for a company that's opening to someone developing what they need to get to the next step or fulfill their curiosity as it applies to their career.
I'd like to just jump in and add to what Carolyn said. That was a great summary. Thank you so much. And I'd like to take it from the other perspective of, if I'm managing millennials and I don't have a budget for training, I don't have a budget for raises, what do I do? So to take on what you just said, I often will say, look, it's okay if you don't have the money, because good news is they're not really that into the money, not so much as Gen X. Really what you want to do is, as you just said, find an opportunity. Let them shadow, let them work with I'm making it up, a Pulitzer Prize winner, let them work with someone in the industry, or let them learn from somebody else. Give them that time to do that, and you will have them for life. So, because some companies say, I don't have a training budget, I can't give them 3 more certificates, which is very important to them. That's okay. Be creative and find something else you can give them, whether within the company or outside the company, using your own network to make sure that they stay engaged so that they want to stay with your company.
We just got, thank you, Anne. We just got a comment from Stefani, and I wanted to elaborate on this a little bit because she makes a wonderful point. She makes the points that a lot of older workers can be kind of afraid to have an authentic dialogue with anyone, but the younger generation, and some older workers are afraid of benefiting and learning from the younger generation. And I will say this is true. Some of my cohort, we were brought up to believe we had to be perfect and we had to be the experts, and you couldn't open your mouth until you knew everything. And the younger workers do not expect that of us. And actually something that I tell to anyone that will listen pretty much about working with the younger generation, millennials, is that it's a great opportunity for us to be really good leaders. And by that I mean to learn to get over our own hang-ups about being perfect and learn to take suggestions from them, learn to coach them and mentor them, like you guys have been saying. This generation, more than any other, is really open to being coached and being mentored and will take our advice and actually use it. And so it's a great opportunity for us to learn these new kinds of leadership skills that, by the way, are the ones that are the most effective even with our peers. Being able to coach and mentor our own peers is a very important skill to have, because we can grow the whole workforce when we do this, and we have to get over our need to be perfect. So thank you, Stefani, for mentioning that, because it is a challenge that we have, and we can step up to it, but we have to recognize it. And the millennial generation is the perfect generation we can practice on, because they want it and they need it and they're open to it and they benefit greatly from it, and they have a lot to teach us about work-life balance, about technology, about all kinds of things. So I would encourage any of the boomers and Gen Xers out there, look at this as a great opportunity to grow your leadership style and skill.
And I agree with you 100% there, Dana. There was one more thing I wanted to kind of chime in on, just because I've heard it a lot from older generations, is that there are some companies that are completely afraid or against hiring millennials because they've heard that they change jobs a lot. They take on a lot of jobs in a short period of time, and a lot of companies are threatened by this because they say, I can't afford it. I can't afford to keep hiring people over and over again. So I don't know, Caroline, this may be a good question for you. What are you hearing as far as what are the reasons for that? Why do millennials jump from job to job so often, or more than other generations, I should say?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's interesting. I think that the coaching that we're talking about for millennials, I think it's really important to coach, but I also think it's important to incorporate, as Anne mentioned earlier, the purpose, of that individual in terms of career and company, and connecting all, those two things, to bring in the things that define the millennials in those coaching sessions. And so I can actually, just a real world example, the other week I was in a constructive conversation with a colleague of mine regarding a piece of her performance, and I had to structure the constructive feedback in a way that also motivated her, and I knew that that was going to be important. She's a millennial. She's a little younger than I am, but we're both millennials, so I was fortunate to be able to take what's important to me and bring it into the coaching session. So I said, this isn't going so well, and because this isn't going well, this isn't going to be able to happen. And my specific feedback was, if this doesn't improve, you're not going to be able to get to your next step, whether that's CEO or business manager, and not that it has to be business led, or start your own company, or become a journalist or a writer. that it's really a holistic approach when speaking with millennials. And I think that companies, you spend a lot of time and money and resources hiring and having employees separate. And so just making the effort to have those conversations, they're difficult. You definitely have to lean into them afterwards. I hated myself, I think, more than she hated me, because it was a really tough conversation to have. But I think that she understood that I was invested in her development. And I don't think you can put a timeline or a salary figure on that. I think it's invaluable, and I think millennials play into that. So I think having those tough conversations retain millennials, and they connect them to a company or a job or experience in a very meaningful way. I hope that answers the question. That's a loaded question, but that in a nutshell is my answer.
And I love that answer. Thank you so much. And I want to say, speaking to the purpose, like you and Anna both mentioned, that works for older people too. We were just kind of told that our purpose wasn't what we were about. It was about making money. It was about climbing the ladder, whatever. But we care about it just as much. So back to anybody, anybody coaching anybody. When you speak to purpose, it really brings people into their own motivation. And we have to do it with millennials. So let's learn to do it with everybody.
And I think that's a great point too, Dana. I think just to kind of sum up a lot of what we're saying here, all these things that make millennials weird and crazy, I feel like it's things that everyone desires. Everyone wants work-life balance. Everyone wants to love their job. I don't think that that's something that's a millennial thing. I think that's something everyone wants. And millennials are taking that step forward and saying, hey, I'm not settling. I'm going to keep doing this as naive or as crazy or as, whatever word you want to put on that we're going for it regardless. So I love the point that you bring that back. Like this influences everyone, anyone who has to react with a millennial or anyone who is influenced by a change that a millennial makes in the workplace just from our high demands or just some of the changes that we like, little things. So I think that's a valid point, definitely.
I'd just like to add real quick, we've been talking a lot about the workforce because that's where people are talking the most. And don't forget, you don't have to be in the workforce for everything we're talking about. It could be in your community, it could be in your church, it could be in where you're working. So when people look at this and they think, well, is this only about work? No, millennials are everywhere, Gen X, boomers are everywhere. We all meet everywhere at every crossroad, whether it's at work or outside work or however you define work. So I just want to remind people that this is about relationships, and those relationships are everywhere in our life, not just at work. Excellent point.
And we are at 30 minutes, and we promised we would make this a 30-minute event. I have a feeling that there's a lot of other thoughts on this, so I would encourage people to keep the conversation going on the YouTube, where this will be on YouTube. Go ahead and keep the conversation going. Leave your comments. If you registered for the event, you'll be getting a follow-up link to it, and we'll put some instructions there for how you can continue to keep the conversation going, because this is a rich topic. And I want to thank everybody here on the panel for participating. This has been a true joy, and I hope we have an opportunity to do it again sometime. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Dana, and thanks again to everybody. It's been a great time and a great conversation.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.